What's up guys, my name is Matt, I'm from Purebred Mutts, and today we're talking about beginner script writing, all the things you're going to need to know so that way you can get on your way and start writing the best movie of all time. Now I'm going to separate the video into two parts, the first part being me just explaining all the things that you would need to know grammatically, format-wise, so that way you can just start making it on Google Docs, your typewriter, whatever you use. And then the second part is going to be me talking about the different kind of plugins or softwares or things that you can use so that way you can just start writing and plug and play. The system will then put your stuff into the correct format. So if you don't care necessarily about the format structures and why they're kind of put in place, then I'd suggest going to this time right here. That'll get you right over to what you're actually trying to see. But for those of you who are complete beginners, stick around. I will dive into it starting now. Screenplays and scripts are exactly the same thing, and they're interchangeable. I think scripts are just something that you give to an actor or people who are working on it, and the screenplay is what you write. I don't think that they necessarily have any differences. Maybe they do, but regardless, it's the same thing in my book. We just write out exactly how it's going to be filmed, basically. The first part of every single scene is the slug line. Your slug line needs to be entirely uppercase. The slug line is separated into three individual parts. The first part, is it inside or is it outside? You can specify this by using either INT for interior or EXT for exterior. The second part is the location. Try to be specific, but use as little words as possible to describe exactly where the scene is happening. The last part is the time it's generally happening. If it's happening in the morning, put morning. If it's happening at night, put night. Is it happening in the mid-afternoon? Put that. Try not to be super specific time-wise. You don't need to give a specific time like it's 3:37 p.m., but just put something that'll work generally. Right here is a quick example of a slug line. This is interior, which means it's inside. Marvin's bedroom, which is plenty specific, and night. That's all it needs. It just needs those three different parts, and that will form whatever scene you have coming next. Next, let's talk about action lines. Action lines are basically everything that happens that isn't dialogue. Whenever you're writing action lines, make sure that you put everything in the present tense because that's how we'll be seeing it as an audience. Action lines and screenplays in general are not a good place to have inner dialogue unless it's a voiceover or something that you can physically see on the screen, because otherwise you're not going to be able to see it. It's not a book, it's a film. So if it's not on the screen, don't put it in. You're going to want to capitalize character names, props, locations, and transitions within it so that way they can be stood out from the rest of the action that's happening. Action lines and slug lines are completely on the left of the page. There is no need for indentation. Here is an example of an action line. Marvin looks down at the floor. His mother, Patricia, sits on the bed next to him. She lifts her arm up and attempts to wrap it around Marvin's shoulder. He quickly stands up, clutching his tattered teddy bear. Everything is in the present tense. Character names, especially when they're first introduced, are completely capitalized, and that's a good rule of thumb. If you have it, especially a lot of times throughout the action scripts themselves or the action lines themselves, you're going to want to make sure that they are capitalized the first time, but after that, you aren't necessarily going to need them unless it is very important and needs to stand out. Next, let's talk about dialogue. You're going to want to put the character who is speaking in all caps somewhere in the center of the page. For dialogue, you do not need to put quotations because it is already assumed based off of the format. If a person's dialogue needs to be interrupted by an action line, the thing you can do coming up next is say the speaker's name and then directly after it, put a continued in parentheses. This is an example of the speaker, Marvin, capitalized somewhere in the center, and then directly underneath, slightly indented from that, the actual dialogue that he's speaking. Below, you'll see that Marvin continues speaking, and so directly after Marvin, we put the continued in this specific connotation. That way, it's just smaller form, and it fits in tightly. You know exactly what's happening. And then directly below that, slightly indented, is the actual dialogue itself. You'll notice here directly below the actual dialogue is angrily in parentheses. The reason that this is here is as a descriptor for the actual dialogue itself. But since he's not saying angrily, he is speaking the words angrily, it's not necessarily an action line, but it is more of a descriptor for the dialogue itself. So directly underneath the actual dialogue, you can put whatever term you need to describe how the actor should be saying the words right below it. And honestly, that's all you really need to know to start going. There are plenty more small things that you can add. For instance, you can put in parentheses O.S to signify that someone is speaking off screen. But I mean, that's just stuff you can slowly figure out as you continue forward. But honestly, those few things, the dialogue, the action lines, slug lines, and the descriptor in the dialogue itself, that's all you really need to start making screenplays. Along with anything that you start learning from scratch, I think it's a good idea to start learning the nouns and verbs before you just dive head in. And so that way you can actually work and do something and make something and then get better that way rather than being bogged down with rules and regulations. Besides, the less you have to think about formatting, the freer you are to actually create and do. So now that we have general formatting out of the way, I want to talk about some software and browser extensions that you can use so that way you don't have to think about this stuff and can get right into it. I'll leave my favorites in the description below so you can check them out there. Now, there are some paid options for actually formatting your screenplay so that way you don't have to take the time to sit there and put in all the indentation that's important. So I mean, you can pay for that stuff, but I prefer to have free things. Now, if you have a Google account, which most people do, and you use Google Docs, this is a great extension you can add on to Google Docs. And I'll have the link in the description below so you can just download it. It's completely free and is great. It does just fine. It's a Screenplay Formatter by CRV. I'm not sure who that person is, but I've been using it for the past few years and it's great. I love it. After you download it and extend it or however exactly works, install it, you head on over to this entire thing, go to add-ons, click that to Screenplay Formatter, and then launch it. And then it's all pretty easy. It's got some simple, straightforward things that you can add to it. I'll give you just a quick example real quick. If you just want to add a header or the slug line, all you need to do is press on this, and then you can put it in. So I'll say that this one is exterior. Normally you kind of have to put a slash or something, like generally follow this. Exterior, we'll put, let's put football field, I don't know. Football field, and then this one's going to be afternoon. And then if you create the header, it'll format it just like that. Now, if you don't put in the dash or the dot, it won't, and so you'll have to put those in yourself, but honestly, it does just fine. I just make this happen and then I bold it myself. But it does that with all kinds of stuff. So if you put in, for instance, Marvin here, all you need to do is highlight that and click on speaker, and it capitalizes it and puts it in the correct indentation. And then if you have some dialogue, you can just put, hey, what's up? All you need to do is highlight that again, go to dialogue, and then bam, it puts it right in the correct indentation. It's just small things like that that I feel really add up to a quick process so that way you don't have to think about it as much, and this is a great free option to use. Now, if you do have somewhat of a budget and you feel like having something that's a little more professional, I got a couple different options for you. The first one is Celtx. Now, Celtx is just a general script writing browser. I know that they have some offline stuff, but it's pretty good. And you can get it pretty cheap for just the script writing portion, $7.50 a month per month for the first year, and then it goes to $15. So it's relatively cheap, but nothing's cheaper than free. And of course, you have higher priced things that maybe you get more usability out of. But honestly, at that point, you should be getting paid to write that kind of stuff. Otherwise, maybe just take the extra time to format it or not spend as much. Now, of course, if you want any demos of that process and those softwares, feel free to comment below and I'll make sure to make an actual video describing the benefits and downsides to each different option. But personally, if you're a beginner and you're just looking to get into it, Celtx is a good option. The doc browser is an even better option. And of course, if you don't want to add on anything to your computer, you can just use the typewriter just using those kind of formatting basics. Now, if you think you really enjoy writing screenplays or just stories in general, then I would highly recommend subscribing to the channel. I am myself a writer of absolutely no renown, just trying to get better at doing the thing I love, making stories. I post regular content, book, movie, and film reviews normally, just so that way I can learn the processes and the best practices from people who are amazing at it, so that way, hopefully, in turn, I can get better myself. And it would be awesome to learn to do what I love with people who are just as passionate about it as I am. If that's you, then stick around and maybe we'll make something dope together. Feel free to follow me on all my socials. I'm around. I make music. I make movies. I make writing stuff. Feel free to hang out, ask any questions, give any comments and feedback. And, I'll be seeing you guys soon. Catch you later.